welcome to the Goodstory podcast.
This is the first time we do the podcast at Goodstory.
Of course.
Oh, is that our intro?
Do you want it to be your intro?
Alrighty. So, I'm Jen, and I'm here with my friend and colleague, Sarah. Sarah, tell us a little bit about you.
That way you just want to immediately hand it over?
Skip it.
My name is Sarah Vandenbelt, and I am a commercial agent with Koble Commercial.
Sarah,
Yeah?
tell me a little bit about you. How did you get into commercial real estate?
I got into commercial real estate because my family are actually in the business. So my dad and my cousin own and manage about 500,000 square feet between Ottawa and Kingston. And my dad got into it. He actually started with the regional group as a commercial agent, but my Opa owned a steel company, and he actually bought his building. And then he bought that and leveraged that to buy more assets. And then my dad started managing those assets. And then when my cousin was old enough, he started partnering with my dad. So my dad kind of got away from the buying and selling side of commercial and more into the property management. So I grew up in the business, really, is the short answer. That's why I ended up specializing.
And how did your family's involvement in real estate impact your life? In the sense, like, how did you get involved in, because you could have just done something else, but it just, their involvement in real estate brought you into that. How was it?
It's interesting. There wasn't 100% black and white that I was going to go into real estate. It was a bit of an organic thing. And when I was growing up, I didn't fully understand what my dad did. Like, I knew he managed properties. I knew he was in commercial real estate. I knew he had buildings. But when I was little, people would say, well, what does your dad do? And I'd say, he writes checks. Because I didn't really get it, especially at that age, right?
Yeah.
You don't say, oh, my dad's a property manager. Like, what young child knows what that is?
Yeah.
So it doesn't really answer your question, but I think I always wanted to get into sales. I knew like business and sales is something that I wanted to do. Mm-hmm. And my dad guided me a little bit. He said, he loved the business and he has a passion for it, and really saw also like so many different facets of commercial real estate in the property management, in the project management, in the construction, and then the sales and leasing side. Like, there's something kind of not for everybody, but there's a lot of different facets of it, and exposed me to that like as I got older and older, and encouraged me to go and like get experience. Just go and work for different companies, go and work for different businesses, like see what's out there, because you're going to learn from that. And there's so much of that you'll be able to take back if and when there is a day you want to do commercial real estate. That was kind of always so I worked for the Ottawa Senators for 6 seasons on and off. I worked for a tech company for a bit. I worked for Gilmore Global, all in sales, but different types of businesses. Mm-hmm. And I learned so much from that.
Did you ever work with him, with your dad?
Yes. So the Senators didn't make the playoffs in I think it was 2014. And I was just wrapping up my licensing at that point. And I saw that it was like perfect opportunity to be like, okay, I'll finish my license and I'm going to bite the bullet. I'm going to leave like everything else I was doing and go all in and work with my dad and my cousin. So I did that for 4 years. So they took me in, they taught me the business from, real estate 101, commercial real estate 101. So I got to help them with the property management and leasing up their buildings and dealing with their tenant relations. And then I started kind of taking on some of my own clients, and it just kind of grew from there. But their focus was mainly on acquiring more buildings, growing the portfolio, growing the property management business. So Koble was someone that was always kind of on the sidelines. They didn't necessarily give me a hardcore recruit, but they were there and we started working together a lot more. And I didn't ever want to work for a big shop. The Colliers and Cushmans and Seabury and Avison. It's just a very different dynamic in those offices versus the boutique. Well, you would know, right? When you're going and looking at different brokerages to work at, there's a certain dynamic you're looking for. Mm-hmm. And I knew I wasn't going to get that from that. And Koble was boutique and small, and
Family feel.
it very much was that. Like, you could tell from day one, they wanted you to succeed. They wanted to be collaborative. It was very, very different than the corporate. Here's your trajectory. Here's, your training guide. With Koble, it was like, let's throw you into different deals. Let's get your feet wet. Let's see what you're capable of. And then, as they saw my capacity grow, my role kind of changed.
Sure.
Anyway, I've started rambling off from the initial question. I don't even remember what the initial question was.
So if you worked with your dad.
Oh, if I worked with my dad, yes.
So another question for you.
And by the way, I loved working with my dad.
Oh, yeah?
Yes.
Oh,
yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Dad, hear that. Okay?
Take that little clip.
Yeah. So when it comes to real estate, you'll sometimes see residential agents that touch commercial. Like, for example, before I even became an agent, my family invested in multi-unit building, and I took care of everything from renting it, from acquiring it to begin with that part. And then with my brother, and he slowly took over, and, I'd no longer manage it or anything like that, or take care of any of that real estate. But I do have a passion for multi-units. I've sold one in the past, a very large one. Well, very large in my eyes. It was a $3 million one. However, when someone comes to me and asks me, Jen, can you help me with my, business? I want to open a business. And like, I always refer to you guys because you guys specialize in that. Like, and I think that if I didn't own any like multi-units or anything like that, I would be very terrified to help someone with that because, a small mistake could be a big mistake, and it costs a lot of money for a client, right? So you specialize completely in commercial and in a niche in commercial. Can you tell us more about that?
So this is maybe this is a controversial thing because I feel very strongly about agents that should specialize and stay within their specialization, right? Because you're a master in residential. And for those people that don't know, Jen is actually my residential agent. So Jen just helped me buy and sell my own personal home. And obviously I'm a licensed agent in Ottawa, in Ontario. I could have done it myself, but I hired you because you're amazing at what you do. And I think that I do commercial, you do residential, you're a master in your own field, and I stay in my lane, essentially, right? So I think that there are a lot of agents that claim that they're both, claim that they're residential and commercial. And I don't really think that is serving their clients to the best of their abilities. I understand that there are some agents that want to eventually transition into commercial, and starting in residential is a good way to do that, right? You understand the transaction process, you understand the whole idea of, getting clients and fostering relationships and going through the whole buying and selling, 101 aspect of real estate. But I think that saying you're both is not great. Taking on any file because that's what's on your desk, I don't think is serving your client properly. You're better off passing it off to someone that I think knows that market inside and out, and you'll get your 25%. And, I think that is the best way to go. And I also think that's how you can become much more of a master in your own specialty, right? So it frustrates me sometimes when I am in transactions with agents that, do a one-off commercial deal every now and then, and I see them struggling. I see their client getting frustrated. And then in a lot of cases, we have to step in and kind of hold their hand or help them stumble through the transaction. And it just would be, I think, much better to serve their client by referring that business, and vice versa. I refer all my residential business to you. And I think there is a slight difference between multi-res, in my mind, multi-res and a generic office, industrial, retail type of asset, right? I think multi-res, you understanding the dollars and cents of like how a multi-res transaction works is great, but you also know residential inside and out. And there's lots of facets of that that some commercial agents don't know.
I would never touch a multi-res, for example, or a building of small offices or something like that, right?
Yeah.
Like it always has to be with residential, right?
Sure. Because it's what you know best,
Correct.
right?
Yeah.
And same even with agents, like again, agents that specialize in certain areas of the city and they become masters in that area. And like there's certain types of properties that you sell, you know, more luxury assets, and you know all the facets of those types of homes, right?
Yeah.
You know the finishes and the fixtures, and you know like how to sell that. Yeah. Where in commercial, kind of same thing. It's like when you have a listing, sometimes I find residential agents, predominantly residential agents, that'll take on commercial listing, they'll just put a lockbox in the door and they won't even do the showings. And that is like not serving their client, right? Being there to walk through the asset, to explain the history of the building, explain, you know, the capital items that have been done or not, explain the zoning issues, explain what's going on in the area, like all of these things. You're just leaving it up to the buyer's agent to hopefully know.
Yeah. Even in residential, like we're present for showings in,
and that's unusual,
homes,
right?
Yes,
Yeah.
It's very unusual.
Yeah.
But certain homes, as a buyer agent, if I don't know the home as intimately, there's no way I can provide that information and knowledge about the home to a buyer unless I know it, right? So I appreciate, and I would appreciate if there were an agent there that knows the home really well, guiding us through that, right? So what we'll do is we'll be there, present, explain everything, and then let them walk through it alone, and we step out, right?
Yeah. No,
but I think that it just, you know, it's really hard to create value in something you don't know, right? So if you don't know that the floors are done in a specific way for X reason, you know, like then you're not going to value the home for what it is, right? And it's similar in commercial. It's even more complex, right?
Yeah, and I think there's different focus in commercial, right? I think as opposed to getting caught up on the fact that there's laminate flooring and 3 offices and with demising walls, it's like, okay, well, you can reimagine an office building so many different ways. That's just the physical attributes of something. Like you could fully retrofit it and do a full construction retrofit, which most businesses will do, right? They'll come and see something that's obviously not going to work for their business. And most of them are coming in knowing, okay, there's a significant construction budget here that I'm going to have to spend no matter what.
Correct.
Whereas I feel like, and not to generalize, but you know, more formally residential agents are more focused on the finishes as opposed to, okay, what is this asset mean in, you know, the big picture?
The potential.
Yeah, and the potential of what you can do here in terms of redevelopment, or, you know, what type of different businesses could actually purchase this type of asset in terms of zoning and all the rest of it. Even things like what's going on with the capital items and the specifics of that, like, or even, you know, the income potential.
Correct.
Right? For some business owners in my kind of specialty are looking at some assets to occupy for their business, but then also, okay, could I put up a demising wall and then lease out a part of the space as well? And then what would that generate me? And then how would that help me on financing? So there's so many different ways to look at it. And I think that, again, to bring it back, you focus on what you're so good at and kind of continue to focus on becoming better at that and stay in our lane.
So we've had times where even ourselves, like we say no to a listing or say no to a client because it's just not our forte, or it's perhaps not a good match or whatnot, right? And I think that when you're starting, it's really hard to say no.
Yeah.
But, you know, it means that you're growing when you say no, because you're focusing more on the things that maybe you enjoy or you're really good at, and just getting better at that, and not spending time on things that perhaps could create a bad experience for someone, and, you know, it could even impact your reputation, right? So I think that's important. Going back to the focus, what do you focus on?
So in commercial real estate, there is the leasing aspect, right? You hear a lot right now in the media with the back to work, and that has really impacted the downtown core, and really has impacted a lot of my colleagues that do office leasing. So leasing is one facet, leasing office space, industrial space, retail space. And then there is sales. And sales in commercial, I would kind of categorize into two areas. One is investment, and that's kind of self-explanatory. And then the other we call owner-user, owner-occupier, which essentially is a business owner looking to purchase something to occupy for their business. And that's my specialty.
Okay. Usually, what type of clients do you take care of, or what areas do you focus in?
I would say about 60% of my clients, and every year is kind of different depending on what's going on, right? Are predominantly medical. But I would say even in the last year, I'm dealing with industrial users as well. So even like flooring clients, or I have a significant retailer that sells like ATVs and boats and things like that. So that's kind of the beauty of what I do, is like so many different types of businesses. So not only you don't need to necessarily be an expert in their business, but you need to really become an expert in what the requirements of certain types of businesses are for the real estate piece, right? So what a medical user typically needs versus what an industrial user typically needs.
Correct.
But I would say most of the business that I do are more medical or professional services typically.
Okay. It's really neat though that you get to work with, is it mainly local businesses?
Yeah, it's predominantly local businesses. I mean, there's the odd time where we deal with, groups coming in from Toronto, Montreal, like other markets that are looking at opening up satellite locations in Ottawa, and they're really keen on purchasing versus leasing. But I would say for the most part, it's all local, which is awesome.
Okay. How is the market doing right now?
The $1 million question. The market is very odd. And I know you can probably speak to that on your end as well. During COVID, during the beginning of the pandemic, a lot of our colleagues that were in the office leasing world really struggled for obvious reasons. Like people were working from home, all of that kind of stuff. But at that time, interest rates were so low. So we had a lot of clients that their businesses were thriving during the pandemic. And so we had our biggest years in the last couple of years because of that. There's still a lot of businesses doing well. Interest rates were really low. People were in a phase where they were really thinking, okay, well, how can I, level up my business? And they had the time and capacity in some cases to do that. So there were a lot of transactions going through our office, which we felt very fortunate for, considering some of our colleagues didn't have that. Now with the interest rates where they are and how they creeped over the last several months, year, if you will, certain segments of our business, like the investment world, have changed significantly. And I think the challenges that we're having on the investment side, and it's certainly not my specialty, so I'm not speaking with authority necessarily on this, but there still is a little bit of gap between what the sellers are wanting. Their heads are still back in early 2022. Yeah. And, the landscape have changed significantly. So a big part of our job is just constantly educating them and giving them the feedback on what we're seeing on that piece. And on the business piece, on the owner user market, those transactions are still happening because really the big, the big green light on doing deals like that is, can your business support the debt on a mortgage, right? And some of the businesses are still doing well, and some of them can see the long-term goal, right? Yeah, interest rates aren't where we would like them to be. And there's other factors for some businesses that are making it difficult for them to make decisions, whether it's labor, supply chain, all the rest of it. But some are still doing well and seeing like, okay, listen, I'm gonna, lock into maybe a 5-year term at this rate. And what's the saying? It's date the rate, but buy the house. Well, it's kind of the same thing, right? So they're saying, okay, well, if I buy this building, yeah, I'm going to be paying more than I probably would have wanted in terms of my payments because of the interest rate now. But in the long run, this is really going to make my business a lot more money. This is going to allow me to level up what I'm doing. And in the long run, this is a fantastic business decision. Not to mention, the leasing versus buy situation, in that it's like forced savings, you're building equity, all the rest of it. Mm-hmm. So to sum up where the market's at, there are still a lot of business owners very active looking at buying assets and stomaching, interest rates,
Yes.
and still getting like aggressive term sheets from banks because, there aren't that many people out there buying.
Yeah.
And on the investment side, there's definitely still a lot of transactions happening. There's a lot of people that are well positioned with, the shifts and where cap rates are going. So, Graham in my office and Mark in my office are still doing quite a bit of deals. It's just they look very different now, right? And you have to get a lot more creative
in structuring them.
Yeah. And just kind of putting the right pieces in place to make it happen.
You said something very interesting because people in residential buyers are on the fence. They're on the sidelines. They're like, I'm not going to buy right now, but like when interest rates go down, then suddenly prices start to shift as well, right? Which is, economics.
Yeah.
But like back home, for example, interest rates for my parents are like, depends on the product, right? But like up to like 15-16% sometimes, right?
Wow.
So when you look at those numbers, like we don't have it that bad. I remember when I came to Canada, actually my first property was around the interest rate we're in right now. So
yeah,
so it's it's just a cycle, correct?
Yeah.
And you were saying like you win in certain things and you lose in others, right? They're just taking the interest rate as it is. But in residential, like some people are waiting to make a move, yet they're sacrificing a lifestyle to wait for that to happen. And sometimes it never happens, like you might be waiting for years for the perfect house, or you might be waiting forever for the market to crash, and it never crashes enough, especially Ottawa. Like, and that's something I was going to ask you. Do you find that the business are still striving and stuff? Because Ottawa in a way can be a little bit of a, recession proof city, right? Because of the government employees and all that.
Yeah, I think, and I mean, to be fair, I've never traded in any other city, so I'm only going off of what I've read and hear from other people. But Ottawa is obviously, a softer market than Toronto. However, I think the thing that we focus a lot on in commercial is like how different asset classes perform versus other cities. Where, if you're paying any attention to what's going on in commercial, industrial asset classes are on fire. That's the highest demand asset class. For a long time during the pandemic, it was like multi-res and industrial, right? In other cities, the industrial is in high demand, but it's just because Ottawa doesn't have product like that. We've never been a manufacturing town. But this is the asset class everyone wants because we are starting to attract the Amazons and some of these larger groups. We don't have facilities to support them, right? And it also is one of these asset classes that can be converted to all kinds of different types of space, and it's normally been a lot cheaper. So to answer your question, how Ottawa compares, like, yeah, I think some businesses have really held steady because like we are a little bit protected by being in Ottawa. But I think all in all, I think all in all, we're pretty lucky to live in Ottawa compared to some of the other volatile cities. Like Calgary has suffered quite a bit in different years, depending on where the economy is. And Ottawa's always been kind of holding steady, at least in the last like almost 10 years that I've been trading.
Okay. And one last question.
Yeah.
Where do you see the rates going?
Oh, yes. I mean, I'm not an economist and I'm not a banker. However, what I've heard is that they're anticipating rates to go down this year by perhaps maybe a full % by the end of the year.
Won't we all pray for that?
Yes. We'll see how that impacts our businesses.
Yes. And also, like people's decision making, right? Like it'd be good for people to just stop fearing that, like, interest rate.
Yeah, that won't, it'll always be a conversation, let's be honest. Of course. But there'll be other factors, I'm sure, at play at that time, whenever that comes. But
definitely.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me. This was fun.
Awesome. Is that good, Carson?
Perfect.
Yeah.
That was